People who have gone out for a pack of cigarettes and never went back to your family. What happened after you left? Serious. This is my throwaway. Got married right out of high school. Everything was going well, but we were young and both were our first partners. Came home early one day and walked in on my wife with another man. Standard insanity ensued, followed by her begging for forgiveness, and we went to months of counseling. Everything seemed well and dandy. She seemed like a totally different woman and couldn't live without me. One day I log into our desktop PC and her Facebook is loaded and there are multiple messages, and I had to look. I found exactly what I knew I would find. It crushed me, but I acted like nothing happened. That weekend I packed up my favorite clothes and belongings that meant a lot to me and snuck them to the car. Sunday evening I said, hey, I'm going to take the dogs to the dog park and hike for a few hours. When I left, I texted on neighbor to see if anyone showed up at the house. She replied pretty quickly that a male visitor was by very quickly. I told her goodbye and the dogs and I just drove. I had a decent savings and thought, fuck it, start off somewhere new, and that is what I did. My ex-wife didn't even try and contact me until around lunchtime the next day. When I didn't respond, she blew me up with photos and videos of her with multiple men and about how bad of a lover I was. It fucked me up, but I just kept trucking. I ended up in a smaller town where I saw someone was hiring for my trade. Years later, I remarried to the best human ever. I went home not long ago and my mom posted a picture of us at a gathering. My ex hit up my Facebook and asked if we could meet for a cup of coffee. She would like some closure. I obviously would like as well. I have to say, for all the resentment and hatred I had toward this woman, our conversation was pleasant and I felt better after we talked. She understood why I left. She apologized deeply, many times, and didn't try to blame me for anything. After an hour and a little bit of tears, awkward as hell in public, hahaha, she asked if it was okay to get a hug. We hugged and said our goodbyes. Once I got home I told my wife about the visit and she got awkward for a few minutes. She left the room and I didn't follow. I thought, oh, I'm sleeping on the couch tonight. 5 minutes later, she came back crying and just gave me the biggest hug ever. She told me she forgot what I went through and she was sorry and glad her life is good. Closing. I left a terrible human for the best human ever. I didn't go out for cigarettes, but I pulled a similar stunt. My mom is abusive, and I had no spine, so I told her I was going to move in with my dad for the summer. I said I would be back before the end of August. After I moved in with my dad I got my state ID. My mom didn't want me to have any kind of it, and I finally got my driver's permit a few weeks later. I felt bad for lying at the time, but now hell no. If I didn't lie to her I would have never gotten out of there. I would be stuck living on a shitty little hobby farm with a woman who did everything in her power to tear me down and hurt me. When I was 18, I moved out from my abusive father. I was commuting to college at the time, and I had morning classes, so the night before I packed my car with as much of my stuff as I could and set off. One of my professors that I regularly talked to after class noticed that my car was full of clothes and asked if everything was okay. Over lunch I explained my situation and he offered to take me in. I had already made arrangements to live with my mother. After my classes for the day were over I went home for the first time since I was a child to live with my mother. I slept on the couch for months before getting my own bed, and we didn't always have the money to eat, but we made it work. I have seen my father one time since then because he swore to me that he had changed. That night he proceeded to get wasted and tried to put his hands on me. I haven't seen him since, and I have no regrets. I was 10 years old when my mom and dad split up. We had been expecting it, but I didn't know that my mom had packed up suitcases for herself, my sister, and I. One day we went to school like everything was normal and went to my mom's parents after school. It wasn't unusual for us to have dinner there, but then mom sat us down and told us we'd be staying there for a while. Ended up being 6 years before we got our own place. I never got to go back to my bedroom again. My dad got remarried and his wife's daughter moved in and repainted my room. When I had to visit them, I slept on the couch while she slept in my room. I still regret not being able to say goodbye to my sister 12 years ago. I said goodbye to my brother and my mom, but I was the only one who knew I would never come back. I moved 300 miles away. I have seen my brother and my mom twice since then. I haven't seen my sister since I put her down for her nap that day before I knew I was leaving. After I left, my mom got married. My sister went to live with her grandparents. My brother chose to be homeless rather than let our mom drag him around different cities in the middle of a school year. I was able to finish school, which wouldn't have happened if I stayed. I stopped trying to accidentally walk in front of traffic or overdose on my prescriptions. Started eating food. Got basically blackmailed into seeing my mom after 6 years while my ex pretended we were together. I finally found a family that actually liked me. Met my boyfriend. Friends for 8 years. Together for 4. Got my own cat. Have my own apartment with bills paid early. Overall, it has been great in between my mom popping into my life. When I was 16, I moved out without telling my stepdad, but my mom was in on it, and I just moved in with my grandparents. I left on a Friday. Got all my stuff in just 2 trips. I was told he didn't even notice I was gone the first weekend. He was pretty mad once he figured it out, but it was almostly a non-event. Everything turned out okay for me. It will have been 21 years this September. Growing up, my mother was pretty abusive, mostly emotional, to me and my little sister. This included basically fabricating a false reality that my dad had divorced my mother and left her penniless, then left the state, as well as isolating us from other family members on the basis that they were bad people. Probably the worst thing she did, which I still deal with today, was turning me and my little sister against each other in these fucked up scenarios. Basically, her drug and or alcohol-induced rage of the day would always fall on one of us. However, whoever told on the other sibling that they did something to anger my mother would face her off, and the other sibling would have a brief respite. This went on since I was 8 or so. I grew up hating my sister. After I got older, I found my best friend in high school, and he helped me understand just how fucked up my situation was, given that I assumed that's how family life was since we were so isolated, no TV or internet, and that my mother was also a teacher at both my elementary and middle school. She had control over everything. At 18, I left my house and moved in with my friend. However, it wasn't forever. He was joining the army at the end of school, and I had to think of someone to stay with. So I found my dad, states away. I took a long shot and asked him if I could stay with him. He accepted. I got everything I owned in the world, which fit in a truck bed, and while most kids were going off to college, I was going to start over in a completely different place with a father I didn't know. It turned out my dad was a decent guy. He wasn't a saint by any means, but leagues better than my mother. He helped me get a driver's license and eventually helped me join the military, where I have just finished my first year in. I haven't seen my little sis in 2 years though, and she still hates me. Even though she's 18, she hasn't left her mother, and since I left, she's become closer with her. I regret not trying harder to be there for her every day. But as for my life now, I have 3 years left in the military, then I hope to go to college and become a pilot. None of which I ever thought of when I was living under my mother's roof. My ex-husband was extremely physically and emotionally abusive, as well as an alcoholic/addict. He obsessively controlled the money and every second of my daily routine. An unplanned 5-minute delay to get gas on the way home would result in a dressing down if I was lucky, a beating if I wasn't. We had 3 daughters, and on the few occasions I threatened to leave, he'd tell me to go ahead and leave, but I couldn't take our daughters with me. At one of our couple friends' wedding reception, he got drunk as per usual and lost his mind over something insignificant, dragged me around in the street by my hair, and pulled a gun on me in front of the wedding party. One of his friends, who was a real pose, took me aside while the groom's mom was driving my ex home and told me, "You don't have to live like this." It was like a light went on in my mind. This guy says I don't have to live like this. It took me a couple of weeks to put a plan in place, but one morning after my ex left for work, my dad helped me pack everything that would fit in a U-Haul, and I'd like to say I never saw him again after that day, but I was pretty lucky he decided to leave me alone after an initial period of stalking and about in jail for violating an order of protection. fast forward 15 years, and I finished undergrad, law school, and postdoc. I'm remarried with 2 more amazing kids, and life is pretty much goals.